Black lights and booze burn when I record for Watts. And every black like Troy Davis who never had a fair shot. All black everything, everything black. Culture over everything, y'all, we taking it back. Black.
Welcome to Left of Black. You're here in the Left of Black studios at the John Hope Franklin Center for International Interdisciplinary Studies, and we are joined today by Dr. Valerie Ashby, who is the Dean of the Trinity College of Arts and Sciences at Duke University. A chemist by training, her research is on synthetic polymers. Former chair of the chemistry department from that university down the road.
We won't talk about that.
UNC Chapel Hill. Thank you for joining us today,
sure.
Dean
Ashby.
Pleasure. So, you know, there's part of me that wants to ask you immediately about the addition to the periodic table.
Oh, I love this.
Since you are, in fact, a chemist.
I love this. I love this. Everybody always wants to talk about the periodic table. Am I going to have my own element? Who do I know who's named after an element? Yeah, I get that a lot.
So let me start with, you know, just talking about transitions. You know, you've been dean here at Duke since the summer of 2015. What's that transition been like? You know, on the one hand, from a very large, recognizable public institution to a private institution of some distinction. You know, as someone who is a scientist by training, now overseeing, you know, the largest school here at Duke, you know, 640 faculty, 36 departments, many of which are not scientists. What's that transition been like for you so far?
So it's been fantastic. And I say that in the sense of people have been incredibly welcoming. The staff here has been great, in the dean's office in particular. Has been great at helping me make the adjustment. They knew from day one, you know, the people that I needed to meet and help me transitioning as far as meeting all of my department chairs and getting around to faculty meetings, which I am doing now. I think I have 32 departments and I've visited 18 of them so far, and met with all of our department chairs over the summer. And so it's been good. I've done a lot of traveling to meet alumni and just to really get a sense of what the university is. And so it's been a really good transition. The things that are different, of course, is coming from a big public. That's a very different mission. Very different group of constituents. You know, the entire state of North Carolina was our constituency. Very different as far as politics and everything else is concerned. But the reason why I love what I do is not different. And that's faculty, staff, and students. It's not different. It's a different group of faculty, staff, and students with a different culture, for sure. But really, you know, really good people doing great work, really smart students, and a staff, much like the staff at the other place down the road, that is so committed to the university and to the students and to the faculty here. So that all feels familiar to me. Size is different. Very different group of people as far as the size is concerned. I had 50 faculty that I was chairing in chemistry, and now there's, as you say, you know, 600 of those faculty, and across all disciplines, which that part is not as big of a transition as people might think. I did a lot of work at UNC with faculty across disciplines, and particularly with graduate students across disciplines, and also undergraduates. We ran a summer undergraduate research program for, and worked actually with Sandy Darity, who is now here, and he ran the humanities, social sciences piece, I ran the STEM piece, but just had a lot of interaction with faculty and students across disciplines. And so that part doesn't feel as unfamiliar as people might think. So it's been a really good transition, and I love it here. I really do.
You grew up in North Carolina.
I did.
And you know, and I have this conversation with Kerry Haney all the time.
Yes.
You know, he jokes about the fact that when he was growing up, you know, his parents said to him, "You're not going to Duke," right? Because you know, Duke represented a certain kind of entity. You know, for folks, particularly Black folks growing up in North Carolina.
Absolutely.
You know, could you have imagined yourself,
No.
you know, as a young girl growing up in North Carolina that, you know, not only just a career trajectory on the one hand, you know, to become a scientist, but a scientist who then becomes, you know, the dean of Trinity at Duke.
I could imagine none of that. from the very beginning. So my sister went to UNC.
Okay.
And she's 7 years older than I am, so she was in her last year of medical school when I was a first-year student. So I knew I was going to UNC. Right. I mean, that was just what we did, right? And you know, state school and affordable, and you know, all those things. All those things, you know, my parents were a teacher and a minister, and we could afford for me to go to UNC. Right. And it was a great place for me to be. Great science department. I knew I was going to be a science major. I knew I was actually going to be a chem major. Okay. But everything after that, I have not been able to predict. I did not know I was going to get a PhD, and I actually participated in an undergraduate research program for minority students in 1988, and had not even thought about getting a PhD until that program.
Let's talk about, you know, kind of the reality of some of that. You know, when you walk into the room, and I think about our colleague Charmaine Royal in this context
absolutely.
Also, you know, you walk into a room and describe yourself as a scientist.
Yes.
What is the reaction? You know, because, you know, you are Valerie Ashby, Black woman. You know, how are colleagues, you know, both, you know, at your institutions but other places reacting to the presence of a Black woman as scientist?
You know, what's fascinating is that I've had a couple of instances in my entire career where it's been a big deal, or it's been made a big deal of it. But otherwise, my colleagues have been just my colleagues, and it could be that the way I see the world also. I'm not looking for a reaction, you know. I always have this theory in my head that if people like me, they just like me, and if people don't like me, they don't like me. And I don't assume it's because I'm Black, because I'm a woman, because I'm a woman scientist. You know, I don't take on any of that. And so, you know, I had 50 colleagues in chemistry. I was the only Black woman. We've only had 2 Black faculty in UNC chemistry's history. And one of them, the first one was Slayton Evans, and he was one of my teachers when I was an undergraduate at UNC. And so, you know, up until the time that I started there were only 2 Black faculty. We hired 1 more Black faculty afterwards. But my colleagues just have always treated me, that's one of the things I loved about that department, as their colleague. They treated me that way when I was a graduate student, and they treated me that way when I was a faculty member. It just was, they treated me as their colleagues. I did have one incident that was just fascinating during my graduate career. I was coming to the end of my graduate career, and there was a professor from MIT who was coming to visit the department to give a seminar, and he came to our research group meeting. And that happened all the time. We, you know, they'd come in and watch us give our research summaries, and so it was my time to give my research summary. And I stood up and I put down my title slide, which had my title and my name on it. And he said, "Wait." And I looked at my PI and I thought, I don't know where this is going, you know? And he said, "You're Valerie," and then Shears was my maiden name. And he said, "You're Valerie Shears?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "My colleagues told me that I needed to meet this graduate student, but I thought you were a white man." Because he thought Valerie
was a French,
was you know, French some European something, and Shears didn't give it away. And he's like, he looked at me and he actually said the words, "You're a Black woman." And I looked at my PI and he was like, "Don't say it, do not do it," because he knew me, right? And so I just said, "Yep." And he said, "I want you to come." I was interviewing for faculty positions. I said, "I want you to come interview." And that's the first and only time that it's been that blatant. But otherwise, I think it has worked in my favor in many ways, because we're a rare breed. And so I have been given opportunities that I cherish because I'm confident, because people were looking to diversify their faculty, or you know, allowed me to participate on various committees, and sometimes that's a burden, but there have been times when it's created opportunities for me. And because so many people helped me along the way. And as I told you, before I was in that undergraduate research program, I didn't have a clue that I was going to get a PhD. And that was total mentoring that got me into a PhD program, total mentoring by my PI that even made me think of the possibility of being a professor, total mentoring by my now present set of mentors that said, no, you're an administrator and you could do the chair's job, and total mentoring that one of my mentors called me up and said, hey, this job is open at Duke.
Right, you should apply.
You should apply for it. And I said, I can't do that. Wait, it's Duke and all of that, right?
Right.
And he said, no, it's a good job. And good people, a great university, you should take a look.
Advantage.
So the mentor in me comes from being mentored by, I wouldn't be here. I couldn't have imagined any of this. And I imagine there are a lot of students out there who can't imagine what they can do.
Right.
And they just need somebody to tell them, even if they don't believe it,
that they can do it.
That they can do it. And so that's really important to me.
You're watching Left to Black. I'm your host, Mark Anthony Neal. We're joined today by Dean Valerie Ashby, who is the Dean of the Trinity College of Arts and Sciences here at Duke University, a chemist by training. So I have to imagine, it's the spring of 2015, you're going through the process, you're about to become dean, and suddenly there's an incident on campus.
Oh, yes.
In which there's a noose hanging. And I'm wondering if you're sitting there at this point in time wondering, what the hell have I gotten myself into, right?
So I'll tell you exactly what happened. Do you want to hear what happened?
Yes.
So here's what happened. The noose incident happened, and I picked up the phone. I have 3 mentors by which I run everything. And one of them was the mentor who introduced me to that undergraduate research program 25 years ago. And he's now a vice president at the University of Florida, African-American male. I picked up the phone and I called him and I said, are we sure?
Are we sure?
Are we sure? And he said, oh yeah, Val, we're sure. I was like, this is gonna happen over and over again at different universities across the country. There will be this is where you wanna be, at a place where you can make a difference. It's gonna happen anywhere you go. And why not be at a great place with great faculty, great students, great staff, where you can actually make a difference and work on it. He's like, this is what happens. This is a part of what you would be signing up to do.
So talk about what this has been like for you, right? I mean, you come into this position at a particular historical moment, right? So it's, a year after Ferguson, Baltimore is exploding.
Exactly.
There's a Black Lives Matter movement, right? There are issues here on campus. Folks talk about the University of Missouri and what happened then, but folks forget about, the University of Oklahoma and the fraternity. And so it's been a year of this, and now this is home, right? This is all taking place here at Duke.
Exactly.
How do you read the student activism at this moment? And I think about, and this is something that I remember Manning Marable saying, that what it meant to be Black 20 or 30 years ago, and so much of your framework for success was to have a Black face in a high place. How are you navigating the student demands and activism on the ground, perceptions of you in this context, some of which is supportive, some of which is not.
Right.
How do you navigate all of this?
So it's interesting. So I have to go back to the core of just how I navigate anything, because it's really not different. My mentors were very clear with me that this is not a popularity contest. Being an administrator is being of service to more people. Okay? It is not, being in charge of more people. If you know anything about academia, you're not in charge of faculty anywhere, right? I mean, it just doesn't work that way. And so the more faculty who actually, quote unquote, report to you, the more faculty you actually serve. The more students you actually serve. And so my approach to being chair, my approach to coming into this is for me to know exactly what my priorities are, what my values are, and then walk that out. And so, people can want me to do it differently. They can want me to be different. They can want me to respond more quickly or less quickly. And the fact is that one of my mentors always told me, if a few people are not happy with you all the time, you're probably doing a good job. That's just the nature of the beast. It's not a pleasing contest. Having said that, because I also, what makes it more challenging on this campus is because I have no reputation here.
Right.
If I was on UNC's campus, everybody knows me,
Right.
right? They know what I do, they know how I operate, they know, when I tell you something, I mean it.
Yeah.
And they also know I'm not going to tell you anything I don't mean. But I don't have a track record here with students, with faculty, or with staff. And so I was just starting the semester of making rounds of looking at people face to face, because that's how you start to build a relationship when all this happened, right? And so the part of the relationship that is the least well built is with the students, because I've seen more faculty and more staff in these first few months than I have seen students. And so then here comes this student, led event. They have no framework to trust me. Right? They have no history that tells them, I heard you, and that I'm not only did I hear you, we're going to work on this, right? They also probably could not appreciate, and it'll be a moment before they will, that diversity was our priority on May 12th,
Right.
not the first Friday forum.
Right.
So we started our strategic planning on May 12th. And we have 3 major priorities, and diversity is one of them, and it's not number 3, right? And so we were already moving, getting our plans in place, thinking about how we were going to do this with faculty, staff, and students. And our plan includes, as you know, some of an education piece that we're trying to work through, a conversations piece, and a communications piece, all of which feel exactly on point based on what we have seen play out here in the last few months. So I just, my approach is do the right thing. Work according to your values. Work with the people who are willing to work with you.
Yeah.
And establish that reputation, and eventually more people will come along. And so that's my hope.
So what do you say to cynics and skeptics?
Yes.
Because part of the irony of this moment at some place like Duke is that, if you look at the leadership structure of Trinity,
Yes.
and the dean of Trinity is a black woman, the dean of the social sciences is a black woman,
right.
the dean of the humanities is a black man.
Amazing.
If I'm looking at any institution 20 years ago, I'm like, wow, there's something remarkable happening at Duke. Of course, when you hear, some of the more cynical critiques, right, and even some of the stuff from students, right, it's like, well, this is just, a front.
Yes, yes.
Which obviously on one level devalues, what all of you individually bring to the table in terms of your leadership and your skill set. But it is a reality of how a 20-year-old or a 21-year-old might look at, how a university is run.
Sure, and that's the piece where I think we have the biggest opportunity. Okay, because I get it. I have 2 nieces and a nephew who are all college students. And they were with me this weekend doing their Black Lives Matter thing, and I totally get it.
Yeah.
I totally get it. For me, so I take that first point a step further. Duke has, it's an interesting set of facts here. Duke has an African-American male running the health system.
Right.
Okay? Duke has an African-American woman running the graduate school.
Right.
So essentially the health system, which is the biggest part of Duke.
Right. The dean of the chapel.
The dean of the chapel.
African-American man.
So the major pieces of the Duke brand, graduate students, undergraduate students, the divinity school, and the health system are being run by black people.
Right.
Okay, that is amazing. And so the question that students should be asking, and I think it's a very valid one, is so what?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
It's nice and everything, right? But
it
so
looks
what?
good.
It looks good.
Right.
It looks good, but so what? And so this is why I loved how they protested. I was impressed by how I thought you are my people, right? Because they were, first of all, I thought, to the degree that an 18 to 22-year-old, has a skill set to be able to do that, right? They protested, especially before the first forum. I thought they said what they needed to say. They said it in a respectful way. They sat through the entire forum. And, while some of the comments may have not been as respectful as I would have liked. But overall, the process was so good. And then they were thoughtful in putting together a finite list of demands, okay? And seeing what's happened around the country, you'll appreciate the word finite. They thought about it. And so their question is, I see this, but so what? How does that impact my day-to-day life? That's a great question, and we better answer it. It's just that simple. So the things that we say we're going to do, the plans that we think about moving forward here, have to, one, engage the students so that they know what we're doing, because a lot of times we're working on things and the communication is not good. Okay, that's a place that we can work significantly better. But then when we are making progress, we should be letting them know. And they actually should be letting us know how it's impacting them, especially on the education front. If we say, no, it's going to take us a moment to, for example, stand up a course that all the students would be taking, first-year students, for example, would be taking, or whatever that piece is going to look like, we should be getting feedback and having a conversation so that they can see it does make a difference. And so I love what they did. I think that without having the forums, we would have still, Trinity for sure would have moved its strategic plans forward, okay? And I think Duke would move its strategic plans forward. But what it did was mark a point in time where everybody said, okay, what are we going to do differently going forward? Or how are we going to be more intentional about this going forward? And how are we going to be more responsive going forward, or more accountable to our colleagues and staff and students going forward? So I think it just put the spotlight on the issue in a way that needed to be, to really move things forward in a really good way. So I agree with them. If it's the same, if this place, I'll just talk for Trinity for a moment. If Trinity is the same when I leave, whenever that is, as when I came in, I didn't really do anything.
Right. Let me talk about a different constituency. You know, for instance, when we talk about diverse faculty, and let's talk black faculty for a moment, right? And you know, you could walk to any university in the country, and you know that if you go to the sociology department, the AFAM department, you know, the ethnic studies department, if you're at Duke, the cultural anthropology department, the English department, maybe the history department, that's where you're going to find, you know, black faculty. When you're talking about the economics department,
I'm with you.
Psychology and some of these other places, right, it's a different experience, right? You combine that reality with, you know, the recent survey that was done of faculty of color here, right? And you hear very strong critiques about the quality of the experience. You know, what do you say about black faculty, or how are you hearing black faculty in terms of enhancing their experience, you know, vis-a-vis what might be just a very normative experience, you know, for their white peers at some place like Duke?
Right, so I'll speak to the first point of where those faculty, our faculty are located. A part of that, as you know, is often we are drawn to research that impacts our people, who we are, right? And so that's a part of why people are in fields that they are in, which I think is a wonderful thing. Having said that, the challenge in the sciences is big for underrepresented faculty, and black faculty in particular, but underrepresented faculty across the board. And then there are certain departments that just nationally struggle. Economics, right? Across the country, struggles. And so trying to think, as we are setting our goals for Trinity, particularly in response to the faculty diversity report, we have to think not just about increasing the number of, I'll just speak to black faculty for a second, but can we actually make a difference strategically in departments that have struggled the most? So, for example, in chemistry, where I came from, one person made a difference because one was more than zero. And when we went to 2, we doubled it, you know?
And the second one became chair of the department at some point.
So, you know, what is it that we can do that's pointed, intentional, in departments that have struggled? That will be the question. So that's one. But then secondly, thinking about the experience that our faculty are having, I still go back to one of the most interesting things about being a dean that's different than being the chair is that as a chair, faculty still let you be a faculty member. Okay, and it's a funny thing, and I have to work with the chairs on this, because the chair is the first administrative position where you hold, you wear both hats. You know, you're the liaison in between the dean's office or the administration and the faculty. But faculty expect that one day you're going to come back and be a faculty, and so you're still a faculty member, right? But as soon as I stepped into this office, I was no longer a faculty member generally, to the general.
You're the other.
I am the other, right.
And in some cases, the enemy.
Exactly, exactly. And so to me, the experience for Black faculty, making that experience better, is actually, a part of that is closing that gap. Okay. Because there's nothing worse than thinking that you have concerns and nobody's listening. Yeah. Or the people in Allen Building, which is the label for the administration, right?
Yes.
We're not listening. What perceived or real, it doesn't matter. My job is to make sure that that doesn't happen. So the experience for Black faculty being better for me, there's some intentional things that we don't do around mentoring. There's some intentional things that we don't do around just socializing people into what the culture of Duke is. In having ongoing conversations with people in Allen Building. Just so many things that can make Black faculty feel like they are set aside and not a part of. And you can hear it when you hear people talk about what Duke is doing, and you're on the faculty of Duke. What do you mean what Duke is doing? You are Duke. Like the day I stepped on this campus, I became Duke. Now I might not like something that happens on this campus, but I am it.
You gotta own it.
You know, I am owning it. And it's the same conversation that I have with students when they say, you know, well, Duke did this. I said, well, this is your university. Which is why I love their first protest when they were saying, Duke University, our university, something of that nature. And I thought, oh, thank goodness that you are owning it. And so how do we create a better sense of belonging? Some of that is also, though, with majority colleagues educating some of our majority colleagues. And some of that's around things like implicit bias that we are doing. Helping them to understand how the departmental culture is welcoming or not. You know, how are we highlighting the awards of all of our faculty, which we could do a significantly better job of, but how are we highlighting the intellectual achievement of our Black faculty or our Black students? How are we honoring the history on this campus, which is rich? I mean, there's no Duke without Black folks.
And in the city, In the city of Durham.
And in the city of Durham. How are we doing that? So I'm excited to work with you and folks on Trinity Diversity Advisory Committee, because we need to be thinking about, you know, what do we actually have control over? And the good news is that we have control over a lot of things. And there's so many things that just would make a significant difference, and say to people, it matters. And you are Duke, and that's something we really have to do a better job of, and I think we can. So.
You've been joined today here on Left to Black by Dean Valerie Ashby, who is the Dean of the Trinity College of Arts and Sciences at Duke University, a chemist by training. It was so great to have you join us here at Left to Black.
Thank you.
Dean
It's a pleasure
Ashby.
to be here. Thank you so very much. I appreciate it.
Black lights and booze burn when I record for Watts, and every black like Troy Davis who never had a fair